We recently asked a couple hundred of you emerging biotech leaders about your go-to sources of information when you face tough professional challenges. Your top response wasn't webinars, it wasn't scientific journals, it wasn't trade shows, it wasn't even consultants. Far and away, you said you most often turn to your peers for trusted insight. Enabling a community of peers is what the Business of Biotech podcast is all about. It's also what our new Business of Biotech newsletter is all about. Peer-driven content, no strings attached, delivered to your inbox once a month. Go to bioprocessonline.com/BOB to subscribe. The Business of Biotech is produced by Bioprocess Online, part of the Life Science Connect community, with support from Cytiva. Cytiva also demonstrates its commitment to the leaders of new and emerging biopharma at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. Check that out. Flagship Pioneering has become one of my favorite editorial targets for multiple reasons. The biopharmas it's spinning up are many, some 35 current companies and 50 now exited since Flagship was founded in 1999, and they're doing a lot of bleeding edge work. Equally, if not more important, is that in addition to being brilliant scientists and business people, I've found every flagshipper I've met to be a genuinely nice human being. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and my guest on today's show is no exception. Dr. Avak Kahvejian is General Partner at Flagship Pioneering, where he's been directly involved in the raising of multiple flags, including Seres Therapeutics, Rubius Therapeutics, Codiak BioSciences, Cygnal Therapeutics, Ring Therapeutics, Cellarity, Laronde, Generate Biomedicines, and most recently, Ampersand Biomedicines. On today's show, we'll get to know Dr. Kahvejian, and we'll learn a lot about Flagship, including how it spins up biopharma so proficiently and where it sees medicine going next. Dr. Kahvejian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you. I want to open up with a question that is, I'm sure, burning in the back of everyone's mind who's watching the video version of this podcast on YouTube or on our website. And that is, why are Armenian men so damn good looking? What is going on there?
Thanks for the compliment. Yeah, I don't know. It's in the genes, I guess.
It is. I don't think I've never met, an aesthetically displeasing Armenian. So I just wondered. I wondered if there was some sort of secret sauce in the genetics. I don't know.
Well, I've thought about starting the equivalent of the Kardashians, maybe the Kahvejians, and see if you can.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot there, but just a compliment to the heritage. I do want to start getting to know you a little bit, though, and I think a good place to start is just at a very high level. Why did you choose biopharma?
Yeah, it's a bit of a circuitous journey. As a child, I always loved science and technology. My dad was, interestingly, an engineer, but a very curious one, and one who loved to dabble in various technologies. In fact, he bought us a computer when I was maybe 5 years old, way back when computers weren't a household item. And I just got really enamored with it. I not only played games with it, obviously, but I even liked to just run the operating system, coding it to basically run things, and eventually started to do programming. Maybe in my DNA, there's a penchant to always want to do hard things. And so when time came to pick a major later on in life, I almost thought computers was too easy, too straightforward. It might have been more lucrative, but I decided that to be at the forefront, I should be in biotechnology and not just technology, because that was kind of going to be the next new frontier, the next new exciting frontier. And that if I wanted to tinker and learn and build, it would be more fun in the realm of biotechnology than in the realm of technology. And so that's kind of how I ended up there. I ended up picking my major at McGill in biochemistry, then continued on and did a Ph.D. there as well.
Yeah. I'll try to shield this episode from our friends in the IT space who might be offended by your assessment that IT might just be too easy. technology. No, but I get it. I actually covered technology for 20 some years before I moved into the life sciences space. And it is the challenge and also the opportunity, the marriage, which we'll talk about as we kind of move through here. The marriage of computational and biology is a super fascinating and super complex and hard arena. You mentioned that you went to McGill and got your Ph.D. in biochem. And it looks like, if you kind of follow your career trajectory, it looks like you came out of McGill with that PhD in biochem, at least on paper, it looks like you made the move as quickly as possible into the business side of biotech. Maybe a brief stint in the as a scientist in the science side, and then move directly into biz dev and that kind of thing. Was that intentional? Was that strategic on your part?
Yes, it was. Partly. So what happened was that at the tail end of my PhD and throughout my PhD, I was doing what I loved, which was science. But at the same time, I started to feel like I was working on a very small and narrow field of science that was not going to have that much impact, or at least that's how it felt when I was doing it. And so it felt like, yeah, I'm working at the bleeding edge, at the frontier, but I'm only kind of piercing that frontier with a pinhole. And yeah, it was cool to be there at that edge, but how much impact was I going to have? What were going to be the consequences of my work and so on? Because it was basic research by definition, and that's what it was meant to do. So that's when I realized that I needed to figure out a way to continue to do science, follow my passion, satiate my curiosity and my desires there, but to also try to maximize what I was working on and what impact it was having. And so I actually didn't do a postdoc. I decided to stay at the lab I was in, which we'll talk about was an mRNA lab. It just so happens, to almost ironically dispel my belief that it wasn't going to have any impact. But so I took my time and I started to explore where that could be. Where would that be? Where would be that intersection of impact and curiosity driven science and so on? And I realized that entrepreneurship was going to be the best way to do it, because it combined doing things at the frontier while also building value and having impact, and also getting exposure to a broader range of things as opposed to working on a very focused task. And that's how I ended up working in a company that was a flagship company by the name of Codiak BioSciences. And it was super scientific in that we were trying to create a single molecule DNA sequencer, which had never been created before. Literally, just no one had ever achieved that before. We were doing it based on current science, but we had to develop completely new science and new engineering technologies and techniques to make it a reality. But I was going to be involved in finding applications for the technology, talking to key opinion leaders about what such a technology needed to do, could do, where it could be applied, what new things could it enable, and then to instantiate that, to actually make that a reality and get to market. And so to me, it was like an ideal next step. It was a great learning ground, training ground for bio-entrepreneurship, if you will. Mm-hmm. When I was in academia, I could see folks working on the Human Genome Project. I could see tools providers developing the tools for folks to actually tackle this new frontier of the human genome. And it was happening both in not just pure academia, but institutional science and in industrial science. And I was just aching to be part of it. And so that's what kind of drew me in that direction. And that's how I ended up at Helicos, which was a quick transition, like you said, no gradual postdoc, then work at the bench, and then move from the bench eventually onto the business side. Yeah. And that's why I did it. And look, I got turned away by a lot of people who said that I should go follow the traditional path if I wanted to enter entrepreneurship or the biotech industrial biotech arena. Yeah. And I just said, no, I'm going to hold out for a unique opportunity that let me do both.
Yeah. Yeah. And that opportunity, I'm curious about your mindset around, when you mentioned that when you were at the, in a scientific role and you were focused on a I think you called it a pinprick sort of point, like a very narrow focus area. To move from that to relatively quickly, a role where you're potentially spread thin, right? Like maybe some founders find themselves moving from science into entrepreneurship and finding themselves spread far too thin. Plus, it's a different mindset than perhaps a lot of scientists have innately, right? To zero in on a specific problem and spend all their resources and time on that problem. Tell me what it takes, what it took for you. I mean, is that just baked into your personality, the ability to embrace, I guess, the breadth of responsibility that comes with the entrepreneurship and foundership as a science, coming from a science foundation, or is that a typically difficult transition for scientists to make?
I do think it depends on one's personality and personal proclivities and penchants. I like to get involved in a lot of things. I'm curious about a lot of things, even things that might seem mundane, like intellectual property, or finances, or marketing, et cetera. I think those are all really fascinating. And the interplay is even more fascinating for me. And so I'm very interested in interdisciplinary, even on the science side, I'm very interested in interdisciplinary research. When I was working in the science lab, I wanted to integrate different technologies and approaches to tackling the problems we were facing, as opposed to just running the same thing over and over again and trying to make headway. I was very curious in applying novel technologies and eventually computation and other things to doing what I was doing. So to me, it was just an extension of that, to think in a multidisciplinary way about how to have impact. And look, it was a steep learning curve. There's no doubt. I barely knew what these words meant when I entered the biotech arena. I didn't even know much about genomics, to be honest. And I was now working in a genomics company coming from an mRNA lab. But that, to me, was what was so invigorating and stimulating. The fact that I was now kind of coming in as a complete newbie into an arena that had a different set of vocabulary and different levers, different things, to different priorities. And I had to make my way in that arena. So genomics was completely not new to me. Product development was new to me. There was a funny time where I had a boss who said, "You're going to be a product manager now." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, great, excellent. I'll be a product manager now." I had no idea what that was. I had to go. I ran home and I Googled it and bought a book on product management to understand what the hell he wanted me to do. I was scared to death. But that to me has always been invigorating and stimulating. And I do think that most successful entrepreneurs, although they talk about focus, that's the key. I think most successful entrepreneurs are actually polyvalent, polylingual, and aren't just subject matter experts on a given thing, hammering away and persisting on just a minute thing. They have to be integrators and synthesizers of quite complex things in order to generate value.
That's a beautiful segue, because I want to spend some time now talking about Flagship, and those are attributes that I gather from my exposure to Flagship are important to the Flagship culture and community. Those poly attributes, as you put it. I've had, from the inside, as an observer who spends his time talking with executives at biopharmaceutical companies, I've had the privilege of speaking with many Flagship CEOs from Tessera and Ring and others. So I've got some perspective on who Flagship is and what it does. A lot of folks don't. A lot of folks, associate Flagship with Moderna, because Moderna is the big success story of recent years, and a product of Flagship Pioneering. But there's a lot more to the company than that, and I'd like you to kind of open us up to the and I know it's predates you a bit, right? The origin, 1999, 2000-ish, the founding of Flagship, but take us back to the Nubar circa 2000. Give us the origin story and help us understand where this Flagship phenomenon began.
Yeah. So Nubar's history is interesting because he was also a scientist engineer that became an entrepreneur, and he did that in a variety of contexts, in building his own startup, then having that startup get acquired, and then building an entire division and initiative within that company to sequence the human genome, which became Cellarity Genomics. I mean, that story has been documented elsewhere. But what's interesting is what happened after that was Nubar decided that he wanted to essentially help create companies and innovate. And so he started a company called NewCoGen, very creatively named for New Company Generator. And that was the predecessor to Flagship. And it predates me, as you said. I joined Flagship in 2011 when it was already now called Flagship Ventures. But everything up to those years was Flagship iterating on this model of bringing together cutting edge technology, visionary entrepreneurs and investors to build companies that were unique and unlike other companies in the arena. When I joined in 2011, we had started to transition to becoming less of a venture capital firm and much more of a venture creation firm. And venture creation, when we, in our definition, was to actually ideate and invent the technology in-house. And I actually joined that side of the shop. Funny enough, we were almost two sides of a firm. And I've never done due diligence on a company in my life. I barely know where to start. I've only worked on what was then the venture labs division of our firm. And my first two projects were Moderna, believe it or not, and Ceres. And my mRNA background was what ended up getting me involved in the Moderna project.
Yeah, imagine that. To your earlier point, mRNA was too narrow and focused. Of course, those academic months or years spent on mRNA was like way before mRNA was as cool as it is now, right? I mean, that's
exactly right. 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 And we were working on the fundamentals of how mRNA gets translated into protein. How does that work inside the cell? And there were hundreds of academics working on various aspects of mRNA in academia. But yeah, I didn't have the vision that mRNA would turn into a therapy, let alone a world-changing vaccine. But it turned out to be the first project I got involved with after Helicos. And Helicos was coming to an end, and Flagship was an investor in Helicos among a few other top-tier investors. But as Helicos was transitioning and trying to figure out its way, I got really exposed to the Flagship model of entrepreneurial innovation, iteration, that creative process of continually seeking value with science and technology. And that's what drew me to Flagship. So going those latter years of Helicos, where we were transitioning from becoming from being a research tool provider to potentially a diagnostics company, all that iteration and ideation happened with Flagship protagonists, including Nubar. And so when Helicos came to an end, it was a natural transition for me to move to Flagship to continue that entrepreneurial innovation that I didn't see anywhere else really in the pure play venture capital world. And so, yeah, my first project was Moderna, working with Nubar and Stefan on just imagining what mRNA could do and could become. The original insight that Nubar had that maybe we can use mRNA to program the body to make its own medicines. And if so, how would we do it? What could it do? What are all the possibilities? How much of an impact could this have? All that we were literally writing on the back of a napkin and in PowerPoints and on notepads. And I was involved in those early days. It was super, super exciting. And the other company that you mentioned in the intro, Ceres, where again, we imagined out of the blue whether microbes could be used as therapies, and could we put microbes in a pill and cure disease. Started at Flagship as an idea, not with your typical team coming and pitching to Flagship an idea, or a professor pitching to Flagship an idea, but Flagship ideating and creatively spinning up a concept, and then figuring out what is the plan to seeing if this is real and can we turn this into a company. So that's what I've been doing ever since 2011, and Flagship has been doing now exclusively, and in a much more scaled way.
When you joined Flagship, coming off of the Helicos experience, you mentioned you went right to work on mRNA and what would become Moderna. Was there was there a carved out role for you at that point, or would you consider yourself sort of? I mean, you've touched so many projects since, and been involved in the founding of so many Flagship companies since. I mean, I almost envision like this sort of roving, opportunistic founder or entrepreneur role there. I mean, what did the structure of that role look like?
Yeah, so my title formerly was partner, venture labs. So it was that I was joining this initiative that we were calling Venture Labs within Flagship, and that I was going to work on originating new companies. Funny enough, back then we also didn't have a lot of staff for all the other stuff that were going on. So I was also involved in marketing and communications for Flagship, and business development for Flagship, and new company creation alongside my other partners. And we were so small, it didn't feel small back then, but we were so small back then that just working on Ceres, for example, as a company, involved myself, Jeff von Maltzahn, who's a partner at Flagship, a general partner at Flagship alongside me now still, David Barry, who was a partner at Flagship, and Nubar, 4 of us working on one project together to originate the company. So you're right, it was somewhat of an ill-defined role and quite entrepreneurial in the context of what would have been seen as a venture capital firm back then. Just to do a lot of science and iteration in a team dynamic, in a team setting, and that's really that's in our DNA now. That same approach is still in our DNA, and it's still the way we operate, except on a grander scale, where we have teams of teams doing this in parallel.
Yeah, we'll get into some of that here. Nubar, though, I made the job. I embarrassed you about your Armenian, the aesthetic of your Armenian heritage, which is sincere, by the way. Sincere. You're a really good looking guy. And so is Nubar, right? Nubar's Armenian. Nubar's Armenian. So what tell me about Armenia. Like, tell me about what it is you talk about DNA a lot. What's in the Armenian DNA that lends itself to the, brilliant and proficient biotech startup leadership?
Well, I don't know whether it's all biotech, but definitely there is an entrepreneurial bent to Armenians. I think, is it nature versus nurture? Obviously a little bit of both. As you know, Armenia has gone through quite a bit of turmoil throughout its entire existence for thousands of years. So I think there's a sort of maybe selection pressure on that region of the world, where we've had to be very adaptable, resilient, persistent, creative to survive, really, and to figure out ways to thrive. And I don't know if that's what has led to many Armenians becoming entrepreneurs in North America and in Europe and elsewhere. But definitely there are quite a few Armenians that are in the business of generating value and creating new things. So for me, it's been both. Let's call it an advantage, I think, in some respects, having been raised that way and having come from that culture. But it's also a burden we bear. I mean, to me, it involves having to be involved in the Armenian community and help maintain the culture and the language and the identity, helping Armenia in any way I can. to support its survival and growth financially and with my time. And so it doesn't come for free. It's quite a bit.
But it's you hinted at some of the sort of core tenets of tenacity and character, and those are things that play out at Flagship. And you and I talked not too long ago about sort of the immigrant mentality, or the foreign, I can't remember whether you said immigrant or foreigner mentality that's sort of adopted in the culture at Flagship, and how that helps define the company's approach. And I'd like you to expound on that a little bit and clarify for our audience. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, I think I want to be careful that it not be taken too literally, and that you don't have to be an immigrant.
Oh, no.
Right?
Of course.
Exactly. Right. And so I think the idea is that, if you put yourself in your own shoes when you travel somewhere, or when you go somewhere that is entirely foreign to you, or even significantly foreign, it doesn't have to be entirely foreign. You have just a different approach to how you take in the world around you and how you react to it. First of all, you don't take anything for granted, especially if you have to move there. You don't take anything for granted. You're really keen on making sure you can establish yourself. You have, sometimes you have a heightened sense of curiosity and awareness. It's just different. You're not walking down your own neighborhood street. You're walking down a completely different street. Somehow, like, you get just a different perspective. It's just a heightened awareness. And I think we try to maintain that throughout everything we do. In fact, just the mere nature of entering into a new discipline each time, starting coming up with a new idea in a new area, by definition, you're kind of immigrating into that new space, and you have to learn everything you can about it. You have to ask yourself what matters, what doesn't matter. You have to almost question everything and not take anything for face value, and also not take anything for granted. So it gives you this sense of optimism on the one hand, and a sense of paranoia that you have to maintain throughout the entrepreneurial journey. And we try to convey that to everyone at Flagship as they're ideating and inventing new bioplatforms. So that's kind of how we describe it. And I think it's helpful. I think it helps people constantly remind themselves or pinch themselves that, hey, look, we're all working on the frontier here, and we're doing pioneering stuff. It's not going to be easy. But there's also a lot of opportunity, because there's a lot of unmade future to be made here, and we do it together.
We know that early stage biopharmas need support. Producing and scaling a biologic molecule is not easy. Companies with new or evolving programs need assistance every step of the way. Join us each week as we discuss all things emerging biotech, including regulatory, financing, and more. The pod is brought to you in collaboration with Cytiva, a global provider of technologies and services that advance and accelerate the development, manufacture, and delivery of therapeutics, from idea to injection. Check out their resources at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. That's cytiva.com/emerging biotech. Just a final note on that. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of just a tidbit of practical advice on nurturing that mentality, like in a consistent way, right? Like, it's easy for companies to say, "Oh, this is definitive. It's like a part of the definition of our culture." But when you see that play out at Flagship, what's going on behind the scenes to make sure that seed's being watered?
Yeah, I think it's in our day-to-day behaviors as we're pitching and catching internally, as we're proposing plans and implementing plans. We're constantly questioning. It's almost for someone who's not used to it, it may almost seem counterproductive, where someone's saying, "Well, here's what I want to do, and here's how I want to do it," and we're almost always invariably asking why. Why that way? Why not this way? Did you think about that? Did you think about this? What if we did this instead? And we all play it. Once you're in that group, we all play off of it with each other. It's on a day-to-day basis. It's almost now becomes second nature to everyone involved. Whereas, look, when I first got there, I was really keen on creating plans and implementing those plans, just very clear plans. What are we going to do then? What are we going to do then? And what's going to happen then? And then I realized quickly, no, it has to be much more agile and much more curious and integrating inputs from all sources possible continually, sensing and responding to the environment as we're moving forward, as we're making progress. So it's very much like pioneering in an uncharted space. So meeting to meeting, when we're pitching, when we're evaluating, when we're planning, that's the kind of mindset we apply.
Yeah. You've, as I ascertained in sort of the opening statement about the flagship companies that you've played a role in, there's a whole bunch of them. Are there any common threads among them, or is there a common thread among them?
At Flagship, we're very much interested in creating bioplatforms, and what we mean by that are new technologies or approaches that can create multiple products. And so in the biotech space, there's often this dichotomy that gets bandied around of, well, is this a platform company or is this a product company? Yeah. And we are adamant that we want to create multi-product bioplatform companies. So yes and yes, meaning a platform can't just be a platform that doesn't generate products. And just a bag of products does not make for a platform that can repeatedly give you valuable assets and create life-changing medicines. So the combination of the two is what we seek in every case. So that would be a common thread that's not just common to the things I've done, but the things that we've all done at Flagship and continue to do. And we've been unwavering in that approach because we think it builds a tremendous amount of value and has the highest potential of having impact and of giving us optionality to survive and thrive in the uncertain world of biotechnology and biology.
Yeah. Follow-up question on that, like the platform versus product or combination sort of business mentality. I'm curious about your opinion and thoughts on this. So, we spend a lot of time talking with companies who perhaps come out of academia with a platform idea, and they develop that platform idea to a point, biotechnology platform. And then perhaps at some point, not even perhaps, like we run into this case all the time. At some point, that company says, well, to demonstrate, and we've matured this platform to a point where we feel like we can demonstrate its value in developing a specific asset. So they decide they're going to build a pipeline. Maybe it's a single asset, maybe it's multiple assets, but they build a pipeline. So you look at it and you're like, well, what came first? The biopharma, like the innovator, right? The company that produces candidates, or the platform company. And what do you intend to do with that platform? Is it your intention to take that platform and be a supplier to other biopharma companies? And oftentimes the answers, to your point, are yes, 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 and yes. So a lot of these companies, especially in a tumultuous VC and capital markets environment, a lot of these companies like the idea of having a platform that they can maybe license for development and target identification and so on to other biopharma companies, while funding, using that maybe to fund their own pipeline. I mean, there's myriad permutations of the model. What is it at Flagship? Like, are these platforms proprietary for the most part? Serving the flagship companies? Is there the intention perhaps that some of these platforms could be made for greater use to the greater biopharmaceutical industry or space or pharma, in the case of small molecule, just whatever insight you can kind of provide on like where your head is on that and where Flagship's head is.
Yeah. Well, look, these platforms, as I said, are invented in-house. They're developed in-house. And the usually the platforms we get excited about are the ones that we think will be prolific in terms of creating product opportunities. So we would not get excited about a platform for the sake of a platform that just generates maybe insights and doesn't generate products. And so by definition, if we've done our job right and we've started something that's really prolific correctly, there is almost too much opportunity for one company to prosecute just because of resource constraints and time constraints. Yeah. And so we are very much interested in doing both, and taking certain products forward ourselves in the context of a company, while also finding ways to engage with the broader biopharma community and larger pharma companies to give them access to the platform and work together on exploiting the platform, leveraging the platform for different disease areas and other product opportunities. So it will depend on the platform as to how much would be in-house, how much of it would be partnerable. But in every case, we ask ourselves that question, and in every case, we invite that kind of partnership. And part of it has to do with the amount of resources you can amass, and part of it has to do with how much you can bite off. Some of these therapeutic areas and products require resources that go way beyond what a small company can muster, whereas others are tractable by a smaller company. And we want to do both, but we can't do both. And partnerships are a great way to spread our wings and parallel process a lot more opportunities more quickly. Yeah. Now, there's a sort of an interesting in-between way, and we created a group at Flagship called Pioneering Medicines, which actually takes a look at our bioplatform companies and says, well, here's an interesting product that we could create, maybe with one of these platforms or a combination of these platforms, and let's create single product companies that leverage one or more of these platforms to advance a particular idea, a particular drug idea. And maybe the individual platform companies don't want to pursue it, but Pioneering Medicines will, and they've got the wherewithal and the resources to put behind that idea. And that's a fairly new initiative we started a couple of years ago, and we're advancing multiple programs that way as well.
Yeah. A demonstration of, the agility that you referenced earlier. And I should have asked this question, if it's even a fair question to ask, or an answerable question. I should have asked this question earlier, but you alluded to the fact that there was a time when Flagship Pioneering might have been looked at as a VC. There have been other times perhaps where companies have kind of referred to Flagship Pioneering as some sort of a incubation space, right? A safe space for, startup communities. And it's really neither of those or both of those. Tell me how the company defines itself these days, if not a VC, if not an incubator, if not this, that, or the other thing. I know there are a number of different sort of hybrid approaches to nurturing the community of startups these days, but give us sort of the definition at this point.
Well, it obviously has elements of the things you talked about, but it's not any of those. So we see ourselves as innovators and company creators. And so what we're doing is a lot of internal science and invention and creating bioplatforms around that science and those inventions. So just to give you a more concrete dimension, we actually have hundreds of patents to our name, where I'm the inventor on them. My colleagues and my team members are the inventors on these patents. So that's not what a VC does, and that's not what an incubator does, right? That's something that a group of entrepreneurial innovators do, and we aren't. We're not a revolving door. Many of our team members have been there for almost a decade or more, and so we are continually institutionalizing this notion of being able to ideate and invent in teams and create breakthrough companies in teams. So okay, well, where do we get the money? Well, we're structured like a VC. We have limited partners. We have vintages of funds that put money behind these bioplatforms that we create. But we don't invest in outside companies.
Yeah.
We do in some ways incubate, of course, because these ideas start on PowerPoint and then they end up getting materialized in terms of plans, and we'll bring some scientists together and we will, in a low burn, small way, pilot our ideas experimentally. So you can call that incubation, but it's not incubating outside projects. It's incubating our own homegrown inventions and projects. So there are aspects that may resemble those things, or those verbs might be accurate, that yes, we did invest and yes, we did incubate and whatever, but we're doing it in a very different way, and we're doing it on things that were conceived completely internally. And so we see ourselves as scientists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, and an innovation shop more so than any of the other things you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I asked, because I can only imagine that at times it's got to be a little frustrating to be mischaracterized as something that's far narrower than what's actually taking place there. One of the things that you and I talked about not too long ago that's impacting pretty much everyone in the space, and I'm curious about how it's impacting Flagship and what you guys are doing with it, is computational biology. You know, so much of drug discovery now is being influenced by computational and informed by the digitization of human biology and the computational tools that are enabled by that. Where is that being adopted at Flagship? Where do you see that going industry wide from here?
Yeah, that is very very germane to everything we're doing, and it's actually also a passion of mine. As I mentioned, I really got into the world of science and technology through computers and computer science. I think it's been evolving for quite a while now in various ways, and will continue to evolve in a very meaningful way. We don't think it's a passing fad. The early days involved, I think, were driven a lot by genomics, right? There was so much data coming out of sequencing and generating transcriptomic information, RNA information, that we needed to use computers to just make sense of the data and run statistics on those data. And that's kind of where the field of bioinformatics emerged, right? And so then every group had a bioinformatics team bolted onto their genomics teams, because they realized, okay, we can generate all these ACs, Gs, and Ts, but how do we make sense of all of it? And then that now has evolved to also including a lot more machine learning, right? And now seeking patterns in those data and revealing patterns that could be actionable. And then ultimately, with now programmable medicines that are nucleic acid based, using the computation to optimize those modalities. So now you're trying to make better mRNA, or you're trying to make a better gene therapy. And so you can use the combination of making many variants of your modality and using a digital readout like sequencing to read all of those, and then use machine learning to interpret which ones are better and which ones aren't, and coming up with interesting insights that are non-intuitive about how to optimize your modality. And so that's kind of how it started to evolve. And now, and whether that's at Flagship or elsewhere, that was sort of starting to happen. But what we started to push forward on at Flagship is into generative algorithms, and to start using algorithms to generate new therapies and generate new solutions. And no pun intended, that's what led to the creation of Generate, our protein design company that is using these algorithms to create new biologics, as opposed to try to discover them through serendipity or high throughput trial and error. Can we now conjure up the right designs based on all the learnings that we've captured from many examples, and have an algorithm give us the best solution to the problem almost right away? And that's been super exciting for us. And I don't think it'll stop in the realm of proteins. It's going to happen for RNA drugs and DNA drugs and other kinds of drugs and small molecules as we learn more and extract those patterns. And we can start to do things that humans would just not have dreamt of doing. They would not have imagined doing them, or the only way they would have done it is by sifting through thousands of examples and hopefully landing on one. So that's kind of the evolution that we've seen and that we've started to really push on internally. But I think there's now going to be yet another frontier, which is really exciting. And that is really understanding biology. So everything I mentioned to date has been kind of making sense of the parts list of biology. Like, what are all the genes? What are all the proteins? Let's make sense of the parts list and try to compile that. The next was, let's optimize our existing drugs or maybe generate new drugs through all the trials and errors we've made and having a machine help us learn through that and generate new things. But then finally, I think applying machine learning to biology itself to decode the programs of biology is going to be, to me, the next frontier. So we've talked a lot about programmable medicines, for example, right? So you can now design an mRNA to do a certain thing, and then you get a very predictable effect. But the number of programs that we know and that we would actually write and trigger are very few. Yeah, they're quite few. They're quite simple. It's almost in the early days of computer programming where we would make simple programs. We need to get to a place where we now understand more of the biological programs that cells undergo and that the human body carries out, and then start to program medicines to play with those programs and modulate those programs. And I think that can only happen through machine learning. It can only happen through taking in a lot of this complex biology, and instead of having a human sift through it and try to recognize a pattern or a linkage, which has been fruitful to date, but it's been very hard and piecemeal, to have a computer reveal patterns that are non-intuitive and programs that are non-intuitive, and then designing drugs to modulate and take advantage of those programs. So I think that's really the next new frontier, and we're pushing hard on that. The next one is also to have computers start to do reasoning and maybe even come up with new innovations and new company ideas. Why not? I think we're getting to a place where we can have augmented entrepreneurship, if you will, or augmented innovation using computers and humans in the same sparring and question and answer creative process that we do among humans. I think we can do with computers and generative algorithms as they get better and better at proposing things. They're not always going to be right. They're going to obviously come up with a lot of wacky things. Sometimes they're called hallucinations, but I think as humans we can start to play with that and spar with it, and it'll increase our productivity of innovation.
Yeah. Are the tools that you're seeing, that you're playing with the Flagship and that you're seeing out there in the industry now, largely proprietary? I think about, like, it's become sort of household technology in many respects. I mean, ChatGPT now is accessible for anyone to use, and obviously that's you can type some commands into ChatGPT and have it do some things with the English language or create this or that. It's obviously on a different scale, but will we see? Are we seeing a solution provider ecosystem in biopharma, or is a lot of this compute work proprietary, happening sort of in skunkworks operations within, under the dome of specific biopharmas who have adopted it?
It's all of the above. I think there are obviously plenty of algorithms that you can now find out in the public domain and leverage for a variety of applications. Oftentimes, though, companies are also developing their own, or they're creating hybrids, using open source tools to create proprietary pipelines and workflows. I think at the end of the day, what's going to provide a competitive edge and lead to interesting breakthroughs and outcomes is the questions you ask and the things you do with it versus the algorithms themselves, and arguably the data that you can feed it. and train on. So those are the things that end up becoming more proprietary, but they're also not very easy to always protect, right? So it's a question of how creative can you get with these tools versus developing the tool and holding on to it for dear life. I think you can do that for a little while, but it's always the pace of innovation is so fast in this arena. You can come up with a great algorithm, and then a few months later, there are better algorithms or slightly different algorithms that tackle the same problem in a different way that you'd be crazy not to leverage, even in your own company, and that others will have access to. So you can't stand still. You really can't. And I do think it's the question you ask with it and what you apply to, and the kind of data that you generate that you can use to your advantage.
You mentioned the question you ask, and I want to ask you just a couple of philosophical. I know we're running short on time here, Dr. Kahvejian, so we'll breeze through these. But I want to ask you some sort of philosophical, theoretical questions around computational, and I gather by what you're saying that the question you ask right now is where the real, I guess, human intellect and value lie. The question I would pose to you is down the road when everything's been mapped, right? The whole of human biology has been mapped, every road, like Google Maps, as well as pathology. Like it's all been mapped. Who knows if it's possible or if it'll ever happen? And every permutation has been anticipated. What will be left? Every question, in other words, has been asked. It's been posed, right? What will be left for human scientists to, what would their role be?
Well, I think there's always,
and I don't mean to, by the way, I don't mean to make this sound like, I'm that guy who's like, oh, the AI is going to take all of our jobs. Although, I do a fair bit of writing as a course of my career, for a living. And there are some pretty sophisticated tools out there now that, you can type a few prompts in and come up with a, pretty comprehensive article. So I'm not going to say that there's not a little bit of like, what's going to happen to the writer down the road. But I'm curious. I mean, there's a beautiful element of the situation where the smarter we make these machines, the more direct and rapid the path to solutions for patients. It's undeniable. But at the same time, guys like you coming out of McGill with a high science degree, bringing value to a space. What's going to be left for guys like you down the road?
Well, I think there's going to always be room for human creativity and ingenuity. We've been through industrial revolutions before, and yes, that has probably eliminated certain tasks and jobs, but it hasn't eliminated the human. In fact, it's created more jobs and more work to do. At a different level, at a different and at a different in a different playing field, and so that to me is a welcome change and an exciting one. I think there's always going to be room to ask questions. I don't think computers are always going to ask the best questions, at least for the time being. And just like you said, in ChatGPT or GPT-4, you need to put in a prompt. How well you formulate that prompt creates a better answer. How many times you ask the question in different ways, you get a different answer. I think there's plenty of creativity to be had. It's just going to accelerate that creativity. I also think there's going to be decisions to be made, ethical decisions to be made, rational decisions to be made, value judgments to be made that can be informed or enhanced by AI, but may also need to be error checked by humans for quite a long time. And we have to be very careful about that. We really have to be careful about that. I think you can look at the world of diagnostics and you can say, well, great, computers are really good at reading a radiogram and interpreting X-rays and so on. But they can be led astray really, really easily with a watermark in the radiogram or some other artifact. And we have to be very careful about those kinds of things. I mean, there was one paper published out of China, I believe. They were able to fool the Tesla self-driving system with a few Post-it notes placed on the street. I mean, so I don't think we're, first of all, I don't think we're there yet where everything's all said and done and we have to just sit back and watch. But even when things get better and more accurate, there's going to be plenty of room for creativity and mashing things together, working at the intersection of disciplines, connecting the dots, and making ethical and value decisions by humans.
Yeah. Well, I hope I've given you I've given you the opportunity to talk about where two of those worlds collide, computational and your background in science. I mean, you've done a fantastic job speaking to it. And like I said, we're short on time, so I'm going to let you off the hook here. But let's close out with just some kind of forward-looking statements about what's next for you and Flagship, and you at Flagship. You've been there for quite a while. It seems like, I don't want to project, but I look at the role that you've played there to date, and I think, well, why would he want to do anything else? Like, he gets to be an entrepreneur over and over and over again within the same four walls. Is that sort of your mentality?
Well, you answered the question. Absolutely. Every day is new. Every year is new. And science is continually evolving. I don't know where else I'd rather be. As I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion, I've always wanted to be at the bleeding edge. I've always been curious, and I'm finally at a place where I can continually scratch that itch and satiate that hunger. Every company that we create, we end up almost going through that same feeling of the birth of a child. That same excitement you get at the beginning of all the possibilities and potential that you've now enabled. That to me is super exciting, and I don't think ever gets old, honestly. I mean, I've got my Profound jacket on. I had that hat on today, and Profound is working at the frontier of biology, identifying new proteins in the human genome. 20 years ago, when the Human Genome Project was being complete, everyone was excited about the 20,000 protein coding genes we uncovered. Well, at Profound, we're asking the question, could there be more? And if there are more, could there be a whole new biotechnology industry built around those new proteins? And so how could this ever get old? I mean, I can name you every other company that I'm working on. I just happen to be wearing that jacket. But that's the sensation that we get every day here at Flagship.
Well, it's a safe place to have that sensation. I was just thinking, as you were likening the sensation to the birth of a child, I've got two kids of my own, an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. I'm far past the point of ever experiencing the reality of that sensation in childbirth again. So it's a safe place. I mean, you and I are probably around the same age. It's a safe place for you to enjoy that sensation.
Right.
And you know what, the different company, Profound, I'm glad you threw that out there. I'd like to have you back on the show at some point, maybe multiple times, to talk about some of these specific companies. As I mentioned, I've had Mike Severino from Tesser on. I've had Tuan Ong from Ring on. I know there are a couple other Flagship Pioneering companies that we've had on the podcast. Maybe you come on with some of those Flagship Pioneering CEOs of specific companies and talk about their origin stories. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, would love to. I'm actually sitting at Laronde. So that's another company that we created, working on endless RNA and creating translatable RNA molecules for a wide array of indications and applications. So yeah, would love to talk about the science and the origin story for these various new bioplatforms and what their potential holds.
Yeah, well, this was a good starting point, and I'll as long as you're willing to spend the time, I'll hold you to that.
Excellent.
Thanks
you
for the time.
Thank you for having me.
So that's Flagship Pioneering General Partner, Dr. Avak Kahvejian. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Bioprocess Online, part of the Life Science Connect community, and supported by Cytiva, which demonstrates its commitment to new and emerging biopharma companies at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. Go check that out. Visit us at bioprocessonline.com, and be sure to sign up for the Business of Biotech newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening.